A psalm of life, what the heart of the young man said to the psalmist. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act that each tomorrow finds us farther than today. Art is long and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still, like muffled drums, are beating funeral marches to the grave. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb driven cattle, be a hero in the strife. Trust no future, howe'er pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act, act in the living present, heart within and God o'erhead. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing o'er life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing, shall take heart again. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait.
Good afternoon. It's a privilege for me to be here today with you to celebrate the life of my Aunt Ruth. I'm going to read a message from my Uncle Bob, who is Aunt Ruth's youngest brother. In memoriam, remembering my oldest sister, Ruth Overgaard Brewer. Ruth and I had 3 brothers older than her, but in addition, I had 3 sisters older than me, and Ruth was the oldest of the 3. Ruth was 8 years old when I was born, so when she graduated from high school in 1939, I was only in my 10th year. Shortly after graduation, she moved to New York City, so my memories of Ruth were divided into those 10 years when we both lived at home, and what seems to be mostly adult year memories afterward. I was always proud of my sister Ruth. I suppose part of it was something I really wasn't fully aware of, but still knew. Ruth was really attractive. I am sure in retrospect, my attitudes were also shaped by the fact that for 8 years, I was the youngest in the family before my youngest sister was born, and Ruth kind of doted on me, as they would say. Sharing memories from those first 10 years is a challenge because you know that most of your readers' eyes will glaze over when you start talking about horses and buggies, calves and colts, walk a mile to a country school in blizzards and overground that was at least in memory of the tough days, uphill both ways. When I look a half a mile away to the white church on the nearby hill, we were looking at a steeple my father rebuilt after a fire. The church was the first pioneer rural church in our home county and was our church home. We shared those memories and all of the living that went with them. The rest of our lives were typical mobile America lives where Ruth and I lived in different parts of the country from coast to coast. I have the fondest memory of visiting Ruth and her husband in their home near Chicago. Their son Robert was in grade school at the time. Dr. Bob was a joy to visit with. He was a sensitive person, moved by the arts, and a great conversationalist. While Bob and I were talking, Ruth came into the room to share a thought. When she had left, he said, "Have you ever really noticed Ruth's eyes? As I look back, I think I fell in love with her eyes, the way she looks, the way you can see what she thinks and feels. Now that she lived until she was 99 and a half, and I am now nearly 92, I think of all the things we could wonder about if we could talk together again. We may well have lived through the most unusual times of change in the history of the world. Ruth was interested in a wide range of things, and our conversation would go on and on. I wonder at it all, caught up in the words of the psalmist written 1,000 years before Christ. A psalm of David. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquity, who heals all your diseases, who redeemed your life from the pit, who crowns you with steadfast love and mercy, who satisfies you with good, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. Blessed be her memory, my sister, who was blessed with a long, long life. Robert Overgaard, Sr.
I am honored to read a greeting from my mother, Joanne Overgaard Larson. Some reflections on my sister Ruth Overgaard by her baby sister, Joanne. Ruth was 16 when she got a rather unusual announcement about my forthcoming arrival. Ruth was doing some work for a friend of Mom's. The lady said to Ruth that she should not come here anymore since her mom would be needing her at home. Puzzled, Ruth asked, "Why?" And the lady said, "Don't you know your mom is going to have a baby?" And so it was. I did show up some months later as number 8 in our family. Because of that age difference, I was only about 1 year old when Ruth, upon graduating from high school, went east to New York to work as a nanny. Ruth and my mom both told me a story from Ruth's childhood. The family was living on the farm at that time. Dad Overgaard had purchased an incubator for hatching chicken eggs, and Dad told Ruth, "Do not touch the controls." Well, she, in her curiosity, did, and in fact ruined the incubator. Dad was very unhappy and said to Ruth, "I'm going to have to teach you a lesson." And Ruth responded innocently in Norwegian, "Men jeg har ikke noen bøker." But I don't have any books. Ruth loved music. In the cold Minnesota winter, she would put on her coat and go to an unheated room to play the pump organ. Jumping ahead to my junior year in high school, our academy choir was traveling to the East Coast. We had a concert in Chicago, and Ruth and her husband Bob came to the concert. My friend and I stayed with Ruth and Bob in their hotel apartment that night. Later that evening, Bob decided we should do some music. So Bob got out his big upright bass, and he gave each of us a part to sing, including Ruth. And down the elevator we went near midnight to the night desk clerk in the apartment where our trio sang "Shine on Harvest Moon," accompanied by Bob on the bass. During these past years, we were able to visit several times in person and frequently by telephone. I deeply miss those visits, and I miss my dear sister Ruth. Blessed is her memory.
I met Bob's parents in 1986, shortly after we started going out. They both embraced me warmly, and I saw that Bob loved his parents deeply, a quality that assured me I was falling in love with a good man. Oh, why do I get emotional? Interestingly, Ruth was 65 then, only 3 years older than I am now. She was vibrant and healthy. In contrast, Bob's father had a number of health issues that imposed limitations on him and his mobility. However, he was, during the years I knew him, quite content to stay at home, spending time with the woman he adored, reading, studying, and playing his music. On one hand, Ruth was also quite happy in the home she kept for her beloved family. She too loved to read, gravitating to philosophy, religion, and psychology. She was a skilled seamstress and enjoyed making her clothes or remaking something she had bought. And she took pride in maintaining her tidy home. On the other hand, Ruth wanted to branch out, and she loved it when I invited her to join me and my dear friend Chris on outings to the Art Institute or to watch a ballet. While we were different in many ways, we got along quite well, and over time got to know and respect each other. In mid-1989, Bob left Chicago to begin a training program with the Centers for Disease Control. That was a huge change for his parents, but they were very supportive. While Bob's father had health issues, we would never have thought that within 2 months he would have been diagnosed with lung cancer and die before the year was out. We all felt his loss, none more than Ruth. As much as Ruth had trained as an occupational therapist and held various volunteer roles and tutored homebound students for a time, she largely defined herself by her role as wife and mother. As you will hear from Bob in a moment, she demonstrated incredible strength, grace, and deep love, and held her family together through some difficult times. In any event, it became clear to us that Ruth, having just lost her husband to cancer, was having trouble with the thought that she might lose her son, her only child, to marriage. The years following Bob's father's death were challenging for all of us, but we muddled through. We encouraged Ruth to follow her long-postponed dreams of travel. She joined her sister Joanne and her husband Luther Larson for a wonderful trip to Europe, including a visit to their ancestral Norway and Denmark. Afterward, Ruth seemed to throw herself into caring for her home. Fortunately, she had some dear friends who helped her to get out of the house. Nevertheless, we worried about Ruth. When we moved out to Nebraska on an assignment from the CDC, we asked her to come join us. She refused, perhaps unsure of how she would adapt. Once our daughter Laura was born, all that changed. She quickly sold the house and moved to Lincoln. She might not be able to take care of us, but she could be a grandmother. Becoming a grandmother opened a great new chapter in Ruth's life. She delighted in every stage of Laura's growing up. She told her stories of her own growing up on the prairie, making the stories from Laura Ingalls Wilder's books come alive. She attended every one of Laura's school or musical events that she possibly could. In time, she passed on to Laura the traditions of making Norwegian crepes, what she called big pancakes, and sandbakels topped with lingonberries. None of us mastered lefse, but we haven't given up trying. In 2009, Ruth moved to Kingsbridge, where she flourished. A social butterfly emerged. Okay, maybe not a butterfly, but a very happy woman who enjoyed the various activities, her dinner companions, and the attention from an admirer, a dear man also named Bob, who thought she hung the moon. You can ask me more about that later. As Ruth's cognitive impairment worsened, it became more challenging for all of us. It was hard at times to separate the condition from her personality. For instance, Ruth could be pretty stubborn, and she had a hard time admitting she was wrong about anything. Those qualities probably served her well at times, but in the advancing shadows of dementia, it made it harder for her and for us. The woman who had been a great caregiver to others needed to be cared for. Would she accept it? I think it's safe to say she never really acknowledged her losses until she couldn't deny them. But by then she couldn't discuss it. She was losing the words. After Ruth broke her hip in 2016, we feared for the worst. Fortunately, we had just moved her into a new apartment on the assisted living floor at Kingsbridge. Sarah South and her staff there were wonderful, but we all realized Ruth would need even more personal assistance. A caregiver that had helped us during her hospital stay, Sonia D'Souza Matthews, continued to work with Ruth at Kingsbridge. One of several CNAs who were helping us, Sonia forged a special bond with Ruth right away. She cared for Ruth as she would have her own family. Neither Bob nor I had much, if any, advantage over Sonia's way with Ruth. Sonia is watching with us online. Over the following years, even though her dementia was progressing, Ruth's underlying fears or insecurities diminished a good bit. Bob had always teased her that she had a PhD in worrying, but now she seemed to worry less about things. Except Laura, she could never quite stop worrying about her. On one hand, Ruth remained steadfast in her ways. She always wanted to look nice. She was forever hiding things, and she still had her own mind. Tamikia Poacher joined Ruth's care team during that time and had her hands full at first, but she won Ruth over and helped us greatly during the tough times of COVID. Throughout, Ruth's love of family remained strong. She especially brightened whenever her sister Joanne called, and she loved hearing about various family members, even when she didn't remember who they were. During this time, until the very end of her life, she showed us the essential Ruth, a woman who knew the magic of a smile given or received, the power of music, the delight of watching a child, the joy of a sweet pastry with a cup of coffee, the comfort of being among caring souls, and the peace that came from her quiet, steadfast faith in God.
Good afternoon. I want to begin by expressing my deep appreciation to everyone who assisted us with my mom's care over the past couple of years, and particularly the staff of the Kingsbridge Retirement Center, Sonia Matthews, Tamikia Poacher, Dr. Taylor Graves, Woody Spackman, Dr. Tim Namey, Dr. Tom Safranik, my Aunt Joanne and Uncle Luther, and many, many others. I also want to thank Reverend Scott Cox, Fred Childers, the Board of Deacons, Vanessa McCullum, and many members and friends here at Central Congregational who opened their arms to us, and particularly to my mother, over the past few years, and to the technology team here at Central, who have done a tremendous amount of work to arrange for the broadcasting and recording of this service for those who are unable to join us in person. I also want to thank all of you who are joining us for this service in person or remotely, particularly my cousins and their family who are joining us here today. Your participation in this service honors my mother and our family too. And most importantly, I want to thank my wife Evelyn and daughter Laura, whose love, support, and direct care of my mother over the years have meant the world to my mother and me. I'm going to take the unusual step of beginning my reflections with a few disclaimers. First, there is simply no way I can do my mother's life justice in the short time I have to speak with you today. At best, I will only be able to give you an inkling of who she was and what she meant to me. Second, I am not going to spend much time reviewing my mom's biography. One of the strange advantages of having this service exactly 10 months after my mom died is that the tribute we wrote in her honor last year has been widely circulated. Therefore, if you'd like to learn a bit more about some of the major events in Mom's life, I would invite you to reread this. Third and finally, I love my mother dearly and miss her very much, so I am probably going to stumble a bit as I share some of my reflections on her with you. But I think the purpose of this memorial service is to celebrate my mom's life while also expressing our sorrow at her death, and for me, the two are deeply intertwined. One of my favorite bands growing up in the 60s and 70s was Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. I love the lyrics, the melodies, and the tight harmonies in their songs, and I'll bet many of you did too. One of their iconic songs that Graham Nash is said to have sung at every concert for the next 50 years was Teach Your Children Well. If you're of a certain age, I probably don't need to say anything more. You already know the lyrics and the melody. But for the benefit of those who don't know this song, I'm just going to recite part of the first stanza. It goes, "Teach your children well, their father's hell did slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams, the one they picks, the one you'll know by. Don't you ever ask them why, if they told you, you will cry, so just look at them and sigh, and know they love you." My mother taught me a lot of lessons throughout her life. In her honor, I'd like to share some of these lessons with you as my reflection on her life and on the gifts she gave to me. Lesson number 1, care for others. My mother was one of the most sensitive and caring human beings I have ever known. In saying that, I don't mean to burden her with sainthood. She was certainly very human, too. But she was always thinking about others. In fact, she would get noticeably upset if she saw someone struggling to cross the street or thought she heard a child crying. She also loved and cared for my dad, who suffered from severe gout and from other health ailments related to smoking and excessive drinking. In fact, I'm convinced she saved my dad's life during some particularly dark periods when I was a young child. Her concern for others also led her to pursue occupational therapy with a particular focus on psychiatric OT, during a time when some psychiatric treatments were pretty harsh by today's standards, and later to pursue a teacher's certificate and provide tutoring to homebound children when I was in high school. She really loved the kids she worked with, and she kept letters they gave to her thanking her for her help. And of course, she cared deeply for me and was always there when I needed someone to talk with, was dealing with a difficult situation, or felt lonely and afraid. She was also there when I needed something to eat, needed a ride somewhere, needed her to make a costume for a school play, or to sew a patch on my Boy Scout uniform. Mom clearly relished our time together. However, like all kids growing up, and even as an adult, there were certainly times when I found her doting to be quite irritating, like when I would be out late and she was waiting up for me to come home. But there is no doubt she was a rock for both my father and me, and I am so thankful that she was there for me when I needed her, and even sometimes when I didn't think I did. Lesson number 2, brighten the corner where you are. Mom was an optimist, and she liked to project that optimism when dealing with others as well. However, her positivity was also born of some hard knocks, including growing up during the Depression with few luxuries, living through World War II, and getting married and divorced by her early 30s. But Mom soldiered on and kept things running as smoothly as she could, even when the world seemed out of control. She wasn't just faking it. She was a strong woman and did what needed to be done, and she wanted to project that she had things under control when she dealt with others. But it definitely came at a cost in the form of loneliness and isolation. Even so, she had an inner light that kept shining through, and I admire her for that. Lesson number 3, always keep learning and be open to new ideas. Mom loved to read, and she read widely, particularly psychology and philosophy, and she was particularly fond of the writings of Carl Jung and of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. But she enjoyed books by many, many other authors as well. She would often say to me, "Oh, you've got to read this book," just bubbling over with enthusiasm. As a boy, Mom read to me a lot and loved taking me around to various museums and churches too. After my dad died over 30 years ago, Mom enrolled in a great book series at the University of Chicago and braved downtown Chicago traffic to participate in classroom discussions once a week. She also enjoyed participating in elder hostel programs, which she would combine with visits to our extended family around the country. Mom loved to write. In fact, she often talked about wanting to be a writer. Though she never published a book, she wrote beautiful letters full of emotion and a zest for living. Here's the beginning of a letter she wrote to family friends following a trip we took to New York in the 1960s, which we recently unearthed among her belongings. "We have just returned from a 10-day jaunt to New York. I carried your letter, Shar, with me, hoping to find time to write. But that wild, wonderful city has a way of casting a spell over me, and I found myself delightfully carried away from one place to the other in my eagerness to show it all to Bobby," which is what she called me at the time, who only yesterday asked when we might go to New York again. Lesson number 4, stand up for what you believe. Although Mom lived what some might see as a more traditional life, particularly by today's standards. She was a fiercely independent thinker and a champion.
While I think Mom tried to be patient and kind to others throughout her life, she really taught me this lesson during the last several years of her life, when her Alzheimer's disease became more severe. While I was still working at CDC, I remember going to visit Mom in her apartment at Kingsbridge in the evening. But before going in to see her, I would literally need to tell myself to slow down. Even though Mom was physically quite strong throughout most of her life, in her latter years, she couldn't move very fast, and she had to work very hard to try and process where she was, who I was, and what was going on in the world around her. If I was then foolish enough to try and push her to fit my schedule, which I'm not proud to say I often did, things didn't tend to work out very well. I needed to learn to slow down and let her dictate the pace at which she ate her food, walked the halls, and got ready for bed. If I did that, we had a much happier time together. It seems so simple, yet so hard to do, unless you're willing to let go of the belief that things have to be done your way. Mom taught me her lessons well, not by lecturing, at least not usually, but by example. She was very human and made plenty of mistakes in her life, as we all do. But learning from those mistakes and continuing to try to do better was an important lesson for me too. As we said in our tribute to Mom last year, she was a woman of her times and ahead of her times, but she held these contradictions beautifully. The world is a better place for her being among us. May the same be said of us all. Thank you.
Thanks to each of you. At this time, there may be those of you here in the sanctuary who would like to share some thoughts about Ruth, and you're welcome to do that. There's a microphone that will be brought to you if you raise your hand, and don't grasp the mic. Let the person who brings it to you hold on to the mic in front of your mouth. Are there those who would like to share something? There's one back here.
Thank you for the honor and privilege to be here today to share my thoughts and memories of Ruth Brewer, which I would refer to as Ruthie. Ruthie had a nurturing spirit that made you feel more like family and friend than her caregiver. A lot of times I was there to be a caregiver, a companion, to help her with things that she needed. But when it was time for dinner or helping prepare a meal or making sure that she goes to dining, she wanted to make sure that I had something to eat. Or if we ate together, if I only just took a grate from off of her plate, that would make her happy to let her know that I had something to eat. Everywhere we went throughout Kingsbridge, she was acknowledged and she was loved. Even if she didn't remember who they were, she smiled, that $1 million smile, and said, "Hey, how are you?" and kept going. Her smile and laugh would light up a room and warm your heart. Many of her neighbors would stop us amongst the halls and talk for many minutes about how much they loved her and how wonderful she is. Ruth loved her family. I loved listening to her talk about her son and his childhood. And I would especially love to see the jubilation on her face when they would come in and visit. I have so many fond memories of Ruth. I enjoyed singing with her, talking with her, going out to eat, and just sometimes just sitting there. The meaning of her name is friend. And I really feel like I was a friend and family member. She's going to be greatly missed. Thank you, Bob, Evelyn, and Laura, for allowing me to be a part of her life.
Anyone else?
I just want to express that I loved being in the choir and looking out and seeing her with y'all every Sunday morning. And it just warmed my heart to know that the family was so close together. And just coming to church was such an important part of that. And it meant a lot to me just seeing her here every Sunday.
I love Ruth. She's very funny. She came to me to get her hair done. I did. I'm the one that cut her hair. She was very particular. Very particular. I had to really measure that everything was the same on the side, and she liked it just so. And that's one thing I loved about her because she, as Bob said, she was very perfectionist. And I love that about her. I, you know, I really thank God for having her in my life. Uh, and she would tell stories about her childhood to me. You go drop her off and go park the car, and we'll have our little time together and talk. She's just a wonderful person. I loved her dearly. I really did. Thank you.
Anyone else? There doesn't appear to be. I share with you a reading from a book titled The Book of Joy. The subtitle, Lasting Happiness in a Changing World. It is by His Holiness Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, along with Douglas Abrams. Listen to these words. Sadness, in many ways, is the emotion that causes us to reach out to one another in support and solidarity. The Archbishop expressed it quite wonderfully when he explained, we don't really get close to others if our relationship is made up of unending hunky-doriness. It is the hard times, the painful times, sadness, and the grief that knit us more closely together. A funeral is perhaps the most obvious example of this weaving of our relationships and community together. But even tears are a signal to others that we need comfort and kindness, that we are vulnerable and need help. We try so hard to separate joy and sorrow into their own boxes, but the Archbishop and the Dalai Lama tell us that they are inevitably fastened together. Neither advocate the kind of fleeting happiness often called hedonic happiness, regular that requires only positive states and banishes feelings like sadness to emotional exile. The kind of happiness they describe is often called eudaimonic happiness. It is characterized by self-understanding, meaning, growth, and acceptance, including life's inevitable suffering, sadness, and grief.
invite you to take your insert and stand and sing joyfully. Before I share the benediction, I want to invite all of you to the reception that will follow, including the post salute. Would you please stand as you are able? What is success? Ralph Waldo Emerson says, to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate the beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded.